Alrighty, everybody. Good evening, or good morning, or good middle of the night if you're in London. Uh, really excited to have Pedro Allevato with us, a fine and honored VFS alumni from 2012. So always fun to do these industry talks, and even more fun and honored to do so when we get to welcome back one of our own, who's gone out, spread his creativity around the world, and is going to spend a little bit of time with us today. So to all of us joining, we thank Pedro for being here. It's very late where Pedro is. You're in London, so thanks for staying up late for us. And we're here at dinner time. So if you're in the Vancouver area, thanks for joining us. If you're from VFS, thanks for joining us. If you're from outside the industry, or you're maybe even a prospective student, someone who's just checking in, seeing what's going on VFS, welcome. My name is Colin Giles, and I'm the head of the School for Animation and Visual Effects at Vancouver Film School. And we are, like I said, honored to welcome Pedro here, who graduated our classical animation program and our digital character animation program as well. So he spent some time with us, put in his time, and is now doing some amazing things out there in the industry. And we're excited to hear all about his adventure. So just a few housekeeping items here. This is being recorded, so you don't need to record it yourself. You can put your phones down. You can sit back, relax. We'll put this on our YouTube channel here in the next few days. So if you got any friends who couldn't make it, or who couldn't stay up past midnight, then you'll have us on your YouTube channel for there. So we've got some alumni here joining us as well. Hi, Scott from Edmonton. Nice to have you back. I see Miriam here, one of our esteemed instructors, is joining us as well. So yeah, let us know where you're from in the chat. And then if you look at the bottom, something a little bit different, if you're just hanging out on Zoom regularly, we've got a Q&A button. So we're going to spend some time with Pedro, and then we'll get to your questions too. This is interactive. Maybe we'll drop in some questions here and there, but for the most part, in about 25-30 minutes, we'll open it up to Q&A. But don't wait. Put your question in as soon as you think of it, and we'll get to it here. I want to thank Elena from our social media team, who's hosting this in the background. So yeah, welcome everybody. Settle in. This is going to be a great time. So Pedro, hello. Good middle of the night to you, sir.
Hey, Colin. Really nice to be here. I'm grateful for the invitation, and it's like, yeah, it sounds great to be here. It feels like it's crazy, like it's a whole sort of like full circle, kind of going back, and I've been able to talk about animation with VFS, which I hold so dear in my heart as well. I had such an amazing time and learned so much. So yeah, amazing. Good to sort of like give back somehow, and I hope I can fill out the expectations as well.
Oh, absolutely. No issue with that. We know that's going to happen. I see some Brazilian flags coming up here in your honor, by the way. So the Brazilian friends are showing up. I always like to say on first day of school, when you get to school, definitely make sure you make friends with some Brazilians, because if you want to have a good time at school, those are the people that are they'll just take you under their wing, and they'll let it happen. So
Right.
that's always been the case. Great. Well, lots of love coming here from you in the chat. And like I said to everyone, if during our conversation here, if you have a question, feel free to just drop it there in the Q&A button. I'll get to it in a few minutes. So Pedro, you've been out there. You've been doing some amazing work, both in the CG realm, but definitely moving into mixed media and classical animation as a freelance artist. And of course, we should recognize you as Sugar Blood. Yeah, I think my first question for you is, I know we've got a lot of VFS students here, even VFS alumni, who are probably sitting in a very similar place to you. Maybe they're in term one, maybe they're about to graduate, maybe they just did graduate. Just talk to us about your Vancouver Film School experience, like how you found Vancouver Film School, what your kind of goals were entering the program, especially the classical animation program at that time, and kind of what your vision was, if any, and what you fell in love with while you were here at VFS.
Yeah, it's funny because like I think when you look back, so much like makes sense, and I think, but when you are in the journey, I think it's much harder to see what the path would be, if that makes sense. So I remember I've studied like social communication and visual communication back in uni, and God knows what I was going to do with that. But I remember like I started like doing some sort of like specialization into cinema, which it's not necessarily what I really wanted, but I think like as a student, I was a bit like confused and not quite sure what I wanted to do in my life. And but I knew I loved drawing, and I knew that I like film, but like I'm not necessarily like filming, if that makes sense. So I've started like studying and developing a lot more of this design and graphic design part of things, a lot on my own actually. And I got like a job straight away from university. It's more like an internship slash job where I was just doing layouts for like cover bands, and I was working for a record label, indie one. But I was just doing that, having a lot of fun because I love music. Or you guys can tell, I got a little guitar in the back, so it's my second passion after like drawing, animating for sure. So I started working in this small uh, record label, which was so much fun. And then they gave, because they were quite small, they gave me a lot of freedom to do a lot of things for a guy who had just freshly graduated. And I started doing all of that. And then they would ask me to film a few things, and filming was never really my strength, but I would just like grab the camera and start filming things. But I immediately would try to put some motion graphics or some rough animation over the footage to make it look nice. But it wasn't quite what I didn't know how to do well, basically. But I developed this kind of graphic design illustration part of things, and I knew I really liked to move things. So in my mind, it kind of like made sense of like, how can I make my drawings move? It's very as simple as that. And like, I started looking into universities and stuff, and then obviously Vancouver Film School is one of the top ones. And then like, I remember it was one year also that I think it was the anniversary of the school or something like that. So I applied. I think I got it's been like a partial. I sort of like had already like a lot of playing. I used to play a lot with After Effects, got some stuff, and then I think I've got a percentage of scholarship and stuff. And then I talked to my dad, and he was like, "Yeah, you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." and, then, and it was like, yeah, it was amazing experience. But I think the craziest thing, because now I look back and I thought, okay, study my university was much more into like cinema, moving things, which is not necessarily what I wanted. But on the other side, I've always loved drawing. That was my thing. And the way to meet the both skills was actually animation. And all of a sudden I was doing that. But I remember back then, and like I was doing because I like it, but I wasn't quite sure where I was going to end up being, if I was going to be a modeler, or if I'm going to fully focus on animation, or if I'm going to 2D, 3D, all that kind of stuff was really blurred. But I just carry on, I think, and yeah, and really, fall in love with the whole thing.
Was there something when you got to school that surprised you? Certainly at the time, I think almost everything we did was on paper. Obviously, it's shifted a little bit, but we still do, a good amount of stuff on paper. Was there something about the art of animation that, that the sequential images, the acting of a character, layouts, background, storyboarding, the idea of filmmaking? I mean, our classical program is quite famous for putting out some amazing films. Was there like a fear there? Was there a naivete? Was there a freedom in the fact that maybe you didn't come in with like animation experience, you were just here to discover kind of your artistic voice?
Yeah, I think the good thing about the courses is that you got to sort of like touch a little bit of everything, and the more time you pass, because I feel like nowadays I do work a lot more with like motion graphics. My industry is a bit more into the motion art and the actual visual effects and the animation per se, but the principles are all there. And I feel like, and that for me was one of the things that really hit my heart like straight away, because you just apply the principles to any other things. So a camera movement could have like a character in there. So I don't know. I feel like it's. I think that the whole thing of like developing characters and being able to um, make the move and all that kind of stuff. I think like the process is what really sort of like what I really like about it. And I felt like, yeah, VFX we got to sort of like do everything from like creating the characters, and eventually the 3D course, like modeling the characters, modeling the background, develop the story. And I really, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that I like the most, really, and being able to sort of like be part of the whole sort of like um, creative process.
Yeah,
And
do you find like how talk to us maybe a little bit about your film project? I mean, the classical program, it kind of like builds you up, and then you're kind of like left to author and make your own film, and you have to kind of craft it all yourself. it's kind of one of those singular experiences that not a lot of people will have, especially after grad. It's not like many people go on and just recreate that scenario. Maybe walk us through that final project, that film, and I know you probably worked with Marv Newland and folks like that who come from a long history of that kind of work, and you know, your sort of creative process by which you developed the idea and then were able to produce this film.
Yeah. I think, yeah, I think like Craig was actually the one sort of like uh, behind, sort of like to show me a little bit. I think there was really interesting exercise, which something I still do sometimes when I'm writing and doing my own films nowadays, which is something that I try to do once a year, stop for a few months, and I just try to focus on something. And it all started at GFS really, like when I was about to do the final project. I think that's something I've been trying to do constantly, where I just stop and then I try to write, develop characters, and do the whole thing. And I feel like this keeps me quite creative, like hunger, than just because sometimes when you do a lot of client stuff or corporate stuff, and it's quite can drains you a little bit. And but it's and I feel like this is like really also like being school is such a precious moments, because I felt like this is the time that you really have to. Sometimes I feel like I want to go back to school. I want to go back and just spend like it's a good excuse to spend like 6 months or 1 year of your life just focus on something that you want to develop, and that's your craft, it's your art, and in a way, in the process, you just learn so much of like something goes wrong and then you fix that, and there's not necessarily a client, and that's a luxury that not that many people have, and the more you get into the industry, the harder that it is to come about. So I think that moment where like, okay, now you guys going to create your own like film, and it's scary as it is because you have to do the whole thing. I think it's such a precious moment, and it's really nice. Sometimes, like I said, I do want to just have excuse to stop everything to do that, and I try to do that once a year. And I remember there was one exercise that Greg used to tell us, like to create a column with like any characters that you come up with, and it's again like something to do up to now, like, and then like it could be anything. It could be a character, it could be I don't know, a pencil with legs, or like Rick and Morty does, like Pencil Sylvester or whatever. You just create whatever character you can come up with, and then you create several of them, and then you have another column that you just create backgrounds, and it could be like a person's belly button, or it could be anything, and you create all that kind of stuff. That's your environment. At the end, you've got like, I suppose you've got like a challenge, and again, it can be anything as well. It just become like a wrestler or whatever, and then you have the sort of like the solution. And then the nice thing is that, and then once you've got like 20 of those, and then you just start crossing them and you just mix them up. And then all of a sudden you have like this, the Pico guy who wants to, who lives in a belly button of a guy and who wants to find a treasure by defeating this, I don't know, this Jedi. It's just so funny because you go into this crazy thing, and all of a sudden you do have a storyline. Because I remember, like, for me, the hardest thing at VFS at the very beginning is just like, I wanted to do something that I care about, and the story for me was so important. And I just go into like loops, and then all of a sudden you just like let it go a little bit, and you start experimenting with those exercises. And I felt like that was I love doing that, and I do it up until now. Yeah.
It's like free form thought, right? Like there's no rules. It's just no one to answer to. It's just go, and just get it out of your brain. That's an awesome exercise.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you kind of went into the freelance realm relatively early in your career, and around, I guess it was like late 2016, somewhere in 2017. You kind of really dove into that that part of your career. Maybe just bridge us, from graduating to the moment where you felt confident or comfortable, or maybe you didn't and you just did it anyways. Of kind of taking that leap on yourself. What were those first sort of 5 years like before Sugar Blood?
Yeah. Well, that was kind of crazy, actually. I feel like I've done the opposite of like what you organically would do. Because when I finished BFS, I stayed in Vancouver for a bit, working, trying to find work in some studios in there. And it's funny because like nowadays my work it's mostly to do animation, but but once I finished BFS, I really wanted to sort of like do 3D and character animation. And then my final film is all 3D and character animation, all that kind of stuff. And that was what I kind of like wanted to do. But at least at the time. But like I said before, the principles and everything is kind of like the same, so you can really apply to different things. And but that's what I did. I was looking for some jobs in 3D animation there. And then in VFS, I also met like Stefano, who is like another guy who was doing some of the production course. And then he moved to London. And he's Italian as well. I'm Brazilian, but my parents are Italian, so I have this strong connection with Italy. And he moved to London, and then he did another course in business. And then he ring me up and said, like, "Do you want to open studio?" This is like 6 months after graduating, right? It's crazy. But I was like, yeah, sure. And he was like, "I'll take care of the business. I'll try to gather some clients, and you take care of the creative part." And then and I said, "Yeah, sure." And I moved to London. I think also like at the time we felt like, oh well, we should open a studio. Guys, sounds crazy, but this is what we actually did. If you want to open a studio, where would you want to be? And then we were like, oh, either New York or London. So I guess for Europeans, it'd be easier to come to London. So we came to London, open studio like day one, and then start chasing for work. And we did that, which is normally like all the friends and most of the people that or colleagues here that I met, they start their freelance career. Once they had enough job or too much work, they open the studio and they start growing. We did the other way around. We got here, started chasing work, and we did that for like, I did that for like 2 years and a half, more or less, 3 years. We got up to like 8 employees or something. Things were like going fast, but it wasn't quite what I wanted to do creatively. I think the quality wasn't quite there because obviously we're really fresh. I think he was more the kind of guy who really wanted to develop as a almost like a factory, like when you produce a lot, you sell a lot and that kind of stuff, which it wasn't necessarily what I really wanted to do. I think my drive was more something and towards like a boutique and potentially find my language or potentially find my style or something. That's what I kind of like wanted to do. And I've realized throughout those kind of like 3 years and a half together. So I leave the studio, and that's how Sugar Blood kind of started. It was, and I don't regret at all because I felt like those 3 years were great. We put us like in a completely out of like comfort zone. It was really hard sometimes. But I think that along with everything that I learned technically with at Vancouver Film School, and that bit of like being able to now deal with clients, pitch for work, do presentations, not feel extremely nervous when you're presenting your work as well. All the kind of like it was a lab. It was a great lab, and also dealing and leading a team. So it was great. That was the journey up until a point that was like, okay, I had enough. I wanted to be able to express artistically and potentially elevate things and potentially find a voice. I really wanted to sort of like being able to not having to do too much work, network. I didn't want to necessarily tell the clients what I was able to, but I would rather like show what I was able to, and then if they like, they get that. I think you cut corners in communication like that, and that's what drive me to leave the studio and start like Sugar Blood, which essentially is it's me, like as like a director and that's it. Yeah, I was gonna say one man band, but it's not necessarily like most of the project that I do right now. There's a big team behind as well, and
Yeah. So I mean, what a great way to it's your superpower, right? It's like your artistic vision, your artistic voice, the things you're interested in doing. It's like putting up a flame and moths come to it, right? Like you are going to attract the kind of work that you want to do by kind of forcing people to follow that. So yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about that process right now for you. Maybe you bring on a client or you're working on a project. Do you have a network of artists that you lean on, or is there a common group? Do you try and work with different people each time? Is there a responsibility to the client in that way?
yeah, yeah. I think when I my process is very much like from like project to project. It's from base to base as well. I think when the good thing also like having that kind of like 2 years and a half of like trying out this studio, it kind of like I ended up like meeting a lot of people because we hired people to help us out, but one thing that helped me a lot is just like the production part. And it was really nice because the minute I was no longer studio at the time, I stopped being a collaborator as well. So I ended up like doing directing and also like doing some sort of a character animation for other studios. And it is such a great way to learn as well, because the minute you're there and then you are, and now with the pandemic, there's a good thing that we can work from anywhere and we work remotely. But also being in a studio is really nice because we get to see someone and then you see, you open their project and then you've learned from them. So I feel like, I think like the main thing for me that was really, really cool and important was that like when the minute I was out, I was seeing as collaborators, and then like I started looking for representation as well. So that kind of like a rep that kind of represents your work. And then again, like it's easier for the part of the communication and trying to sell you out, or as in like trying to sell your work and stuff. So that was good. And and then and then putting the projects together is really depends on like I suppose the budget, the time that we have to do it and develop. Um, Sometimes I get a project that I have like myself like doing a lot of like pre-production, and then maybe have like a team growing, because like they're usually the way I normally try to work. I try to get a lot of like creative control at the beginning, so style frames, the concept art, and storyboards, that kind of like open to animatic. Like I like to put that, I'm very much hands-on. And then I think once that kind of like groundwork is kind of like finished, then this is when we start bringing other people from other disciplines to sort of like, but mainly like animation as well. And nowadays, like the more I mostly do like 2D animation. So I've got like guys who are always bringing them up to do sort of like some poses for me, and then like we've got like After Effects guys, and then it's funny because all over the world I've worked. Like at the moment I'm doing the project. I've just finished like one last video for Marvel, which is really going to be a cool one, I think. And then the guys are all over. There's a guy in Czech Republic. We've got like another guy in India. There's like 2 animators here in London, myself, and we have and one guy in the US. So yeah, that's a good thing about pandemic, because like that's work from people all over the world. Yeah.
Brought everybody together in a weird way, didn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, what about the sort of lay of the industry that you're working in right now? I know certainly when I started in the mid '90s, it was like you either went into feature film, TV, or if it was advertising, it was like just going to go on TV like that. There was like it was a very narrow market.
Mhm.
Now I would imagine when you're working on a project, is it specifically for a social media campaign? Is it, do you have to be aware of the fact that it could be, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube? Is it going to be corporate internal stuff? Is it going to be a big branding, affair where you're kind of speaking to a global audience, or is it, focused on in a single country or a single, market in that way? Maybe just talk to us and then your own relationship with social media, in the sense that you've got to promote yourself and promote your brand and promote what you're doing. Maybe just talk us through the landscape of the industry that you're finding it, or your portion of the industry that you do most of your work in, even just over the last 2 or 3 years of how that's shaping, and the kind of different considerations you have to have from the business side of things.
Yeah. I think like nowadays everything has to move, like to start with, which is it's really nice, I guess, for us that do animation basically. Like I think a lot of the stuff that I put out sometimes are like just illustrations, and but then the fact that sometimes they move a little bit, and that's so good and then so rewarding, because everyone wants that. No one wants necessarily still things anymore. My feeling is that like that also has to be a lot more, like you were saying, like before we just had this thing, and then if you're doing like you're hoping to get a broadcast advertisement because that's where the money would be and that's where the exposure would be. But now it's just like yourself can be also like a you can promote yourself by not spending any money whatsoever. And so I think, and then it's funny because like I feel like when I was looking at when I fresh out of school as well, was my hope was, and this is what I really wanted to target and do, it was like work for big studios. And then eventually I've learned, and then I think by coming to London, London is a very strong in terms of like a hub of like motion graphics. So advertisement is such a broad word here because so what do? Do you know what I mean? So is that advertising for online? Is that advertising? Because it could be anything. It could also be the same people that will be doing advertising. They will also be doing sort of opening titles for a film or for TV show or something like this. And you don't necessarily have, well, we have like Frame Store, we have a couple of like big studios, but the amount of like smaller studios that are doing really nice creative work is just like there's so many. And 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 I feel like I kind of like I'm almost not really thinking about it. I ended up being in the motion graphic industry. Also because I feel like there's a really strong sense of like design. Everything, we're not necessarily being focused on one skill. I think things have to look nice, which is something that I've always yeah, I like it. I've always wanted to make things look nice as well, not only like technically move really well, but I really wanted them to look nice. And but again, like if you're working in a big studio, you might be doing something small, and whereas like when you are essentially doing advertisement, you get more creative freedom. And I think that was paramount for my career. Like I got because I wasn't necessarily targeting big studios or big films, and I used to work for Steven Spielberg. You're never going to direct, you know what I mean? You're going to do like something small, which is although it's amazing, but it wasn't necessarily what I want to do. Um, and then like I started getting more space to do other things and music videos and being able to develop the creative part of things as well. And then I feel like what I fell in love with during like Vancouver Film School as well was the process of creating the whole thing from beginning to end. And but not on my own. Hopefully, being able to collaborate, like anyways, but like that kind of like process. And I felt like the industry of the motion graphic industry gave me kind of a little bit of that, and the advertisement as well, I guess, because they go along really well. Um, so yeah, I feel like now you have it is kind of like you can create like videos for social media, you can create videos for opening titles. There's so many ways that you can express and make it look the way you want, and then maybe have a really strong storytelling as well. And I think that kind of like leads to better work. Like it's funny because if you put quality in like a small piece, it just like leads to better work and better work and better work. And then that's how I feel like my that's my take on the industry. Like I really I enjoy that kind of like idea of being able to develop the whole creative process. I really like that. Um, and and then yeah, I think this is it really. Like we all starts with like illustrating and then like finding sort of like the way I do things. It's really funny because talking about myself sometimes it's hard because I'm really harsh on me. It's like, you know what, I'm not good enough. I should be doing this different. I should be doing that. And always trying to be better a bit. Um, but sometimes it's also finding a little bit like sweet spot and see what your comfort zone is and trying to develop that. And then like, and it's amazing because how sometimes people just resonate with that and they want something like that because they resonate with that. Um, when we were like back in the old studio here in London, we've ended up like spending money and trying to find a business developer to bring more business to us. But to my knowledge, I think from my experience, it's just more if I could put like time and money on my own project, on my own craft, I think that's what kind of leads to better jobs. Because the better you do one job, the next one's going to be better, and people will want something like that, and you're going to make it better. And then they keep coming back, and
Yeah.
that's my industry. That's the industry I am right now in London, and I suppose like the world as well. Like most of my clients are in New York and stuff. So yeah, it's a
And
bit
I
different.
think audiences can see through it, right? Like they can see through the facade of it or the fakeness of it or the corporateness of it. But when you're, I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, and the projects that I most loved were, yeah, the short ones, the commercials, or one-off projects or title sequences I did because, yeah, you just put all your effort into this short little piece. Sometimes, it takes 4 or 5 months or whatever, but then it's done, and then you get to move on to the next one. When you're working on, season 5 of a television series, you
Yeah,
do get loose, right? You lose that sharpness or the competitive edge, not with other people, but with yourself. That desire to constantly improve. And yeah, it's I mean, what there's no better risk than taking a risk on yourself. So yeah,
yeah.
that's awesome. Um, well, I got quite a few questions here, and they're definitely all across the spectrum of good questions. So let's start here. This is from Corey, and Corey asks, "Can you talk a bit about working with high-profile clients like Netflix and Adidas? What are some pros and cons of that?"
Um, right. I think well, I've been so lucky, really lucky with the Netflix job was something really amazing because like I work with a rep in LA and then he represents me and then we've been working together for a couple of years. It's funny because it's one of those collaborations. I didn't get that much work coming from him for a while, and then all of a sudden one day he calls me, "Do you want to pitch for Netflix for Stranger Things?" And I was a big fan of the show. I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." So what they were doing, they were selecting 6 artists. I'm just telling the story about what happened, how I got jobs, so you guys can understand why how my relationship with Netflix was. Um, they were selecting 6 artists across the globe to represent recreate some of the iconic scenes in whatever way we wanted to, and then each one had kind of like very specific style of how to do things. And there was a lot of people pitching as well. So I came in and I started pitching for them, and I did a lot of character development. I drew a lot of the characters, and being a fan of the show as well is I think it's easier somehow because you understand the characters in and out. And so I did all of that. And I'm sometimes most of the time when I pitch and when I create a presentation, I'm very aggressive. I like to have many pages, and I'm really trying to explain what the characters are, even though they already know what they are. So I try to do that very often with clients, where I just trying to bring as much as information as I can, especially at the beginning. Almost like you're doing your homework, if that makes sense. So then they award me the project. Oh, and then also I got to choose the scene. So the scene was like the handshake between Dustin and Steven. And I remember they had this lightsaber, so I wanted to, actually make their creative kind of a handshake into an actual animation world where they actually see the lightsaber. So there was a lot of work done for the pitching and for the presentation that I present to them, basically. So once that was awarded, from that point on, it was just it was actually very easy to deal with them because the idea is and I think that ties back to what I was saying before. You cut corners in the communication once this is what you do. Either you have a style or this is how almost like your portfolio. This is kind of talks for itself. And then and again, I'm trying to be extremely humble here as well because I don't feel there's so much work put in on that, and I feel like there's so many people doing some amazing things and 10 times better than me. But I think the way things were presented at the very beginning was key for the client to understand. Okay, this is how things will go, and so they had a lot of these things. So and then the whole idea behind us also is about reinterpreting a scene that already exists. So they have to give some freedom for you to, do your thing basically. Yeah. So it was very, very easy working with Netflix because of that. We had a few rounds of amends, but there are a few things that they wanted to get rid of because I had a lot of blood coming out of Steve's nose because he always gets beaten up, and they're maybe turn it down a little bit. So there's always a little bit, but overall, I think it was actually fine. And yeah, also the team was very excited. So the quality we were putting there, I think was a little bit better than Netflix was expecting as well, because in their head, it was okay, this is going to be a social media thing. And then the whole thing blew up, and then super viral, was amazing. But I think so that was really good. So it was a big client, but I think the project itself wasn't necessarily what they put in all their money on. So the level of expectation wasn't necessarily, it was I think we developed something a little bit higher than expectation with them. Then working with Marvel was a little bit different. It was fun, but again, it was a project that leads to another project. So they see the Stranger Things and they want to do something similar. And then to me, it was absolutely amazing because obviously Stranger Things, I love the show, but Marvel, I grew up drawing Wolverine, they're like retracing the comics and stuff. And all of a sudden, this guy say, "Look, go ahead and draw Wolverine however you want." And I'm like, "What?" So that was really nice. So the amount of love that I was putting in those uh, projects, I felt like it also makes things a little bit easier. I think for me the hardest thing is when you have a client that you don't necessarily understand or you don't necessarily resonate with, and then you do have to communicate somehow. Like I've recently worked with it wasn't a big firm, it was like a, a Japanese firm, and they work with like with contingency urinal contingency. So like very all elderly people who need to wear some sort of like device to tell them that the bladder is full. So like to communicate all of that, it was just like that was a bit of a challenge because you're trying to be. And I remember at some point they were saying, "But look, this is like older people. They're kind of hipster because they like technology and they wear this." So I decided to sort of have this older looking dude, and I started putting tattoos all over his body, and he was hipster and looking nice. And the creative director loved it, but he was like really scared because of the Japanese. I think Japanese culture, maybe with the tattoos, there might be some problems, especially if it's like your target audience is like elderly people. So, that was a lot more back and forth with those guys than with any of the Marvel Stranger Things project.
I love that kind of idea of just trying to put the same amount of like love into any of those projects, and just focus on that no matter, yeah, if it's something you can't relate to or something that you've been dreaming of doing for your whole life that you can't even imagine you're doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was a great question. Well, I wanted to give a shout out to Kit, who also asked something about that because she said they loved your Stranger Things morning cartoon. So there you go. There's some love for the Stranger Things tonight. Here's another good question here for you. Scott Hoffman. Scott asked, during my time at VFS, welcome back, Scott. Nice to see another alumni here. I heard the phrase fail fast a lot. What were some important lessons you've learned through challenges and experience over these last 10 years?
Hmm. Um, right. I think again, like I feel like yeah, fail a lot. Like I think I kind of like covered that like by more or less talking about like my old studio as well, where I had a lot of like
Mhm.
it was a lab. So there's a lot of things I wasn't doing right, but we were just trying. And again, like I think a lot of my colleagues and a lot of the guys that I work with, there's some like amazing animators, and they're doing some great work, and like far more technical and better than what I've been doing. I think I really do. But I think like what I wanted to do, it's more like having like what I said before, like this kind of like being able to touch a little bit of the whole process, the creative process. My specialization would be character animation and sort of like I suppose like the concept, but the concept, I'm not a concept artist. I cannot like create whatever. I need to do something within my style, and that's what I my kind of like um comfort zone is. So I feel like to do uh, to make that to sort of play those cards, because I feel like that's where my strengths are. Uh, the goal wasn't necessarily to be the best character animator in the world or be the best concept artist. Was be sort of like being able to see the whole process and being able to potentially direct people, and that's I think like that's what I that was those are my strengths, like more generalist and some to a certain extent.
Mhm.
So yeah, I ended up like just sort of like trying everything. So like when I was at school, I would just try After Effects, and then I wasn't satisfied with that. I would just grab the camera and just start playing around with that. And I have this constant hunger of like I want to learn a new tool, learn a new thing, and I think that helped a lot. But in the process, I was just doing so many mistakes and terrible things. But and then I suppose like eventually you just find what you do best, and you start try to focus on that. And then one of those things, like what I was talking about, a lot of my friends and colleagues here were excellent animators and much better than me. They might not be able to present a work the way I would present, if that makes sense, or communicate like how I want to tell the story. And so I think it's more like this. It's trying to sort of like try to feel things out and see what you sort of like where you fit and what you feel comfortable, and what you like doing as well.
Yeah. You almost have to
Um,
accept it, right? Like, you just have to be like, "Yeah, okay, I'm not gonna be the Glenn Keane of the world, but I'm a good public speaker," or, whatever, and you try and combine those loves. Yeah, for sure. We got a couple of questions here, a number of questions about pitching. So rather than read them all separately, I'll just kind of ask you in general, like, and Alex has a kind of a very specific version of this question, which is he feels that that maybe he sounds like a aggressive salesman and when pitching, especially on passion projects, should they lean off on it, try and be less aggressive? So maybe there's a general question to you is like, what is your process for pitching ideas? Like, what's your mentality behind it? What do you need to get through, and what do you try and avoid?
mhm. I think it depends on like if I'm doing like a personal project and I want to raise money. I've never been able to be. I was never any good at that, to be honest. Like I never been able to raise much money. I've talked to my reps and production houses who sort of like represents me, and I try in different ways, and then I talk to producers. I think what happened as well, I'm quite like hyperactive in a way. I have a lot of energy. So if I feel like I've got something that I'm proud of, or somehow I want to make it happen, I just go ahead and do it. So I think all the personal projects that I've done before, I've tried to raise money, I've tried to raise this and that, but when at the end of the day, I just had some money saved up. I stopped working for 3 months and I just focus on that, and I just try to do as much as I can. And then sometimes when that's kind of like very beginning or pre-production or even a little bit of production is already done, I kind of like start feeling the gaps with commercial project, and maybe have a team and I can hold that team to do a scene from me here, a scene from me there. Um, so so pitching personal projects I found really difficult because it's a whole different thing. Whereas like I think the commercial project, it's funny because like I don't see as like, okay, I'm gonna trying to sell what I do, because I think this is what I did at the beginning as well. And I noticed that this is not what I really wanted to be doing. And it is about sort of like creating something that you like, and maybe creating the world, or creating some couple of characters or color palettes. I come like sometimes with a lot of the sort of like groundwork done, even though it's a pitch. And then like a lot of those pitches are like, some of them are paid, some of them are not paid. But like it is about, I think like I've also sort of like developed a system where I know where I'm gonna get my references from, and I have like this strong sort of a keynote slash InDesign, so I can just reshuffle things. So and the more you do, you kind of like, again, you like, I enjoy the process, and then I just, oh, that reference went well there, and all of a sudden sometimes uh, I'm very present on like I draw a little bit every day in the morning, and then I create something, and maybe then I'll go anywhere. Maybe I'll just post that on Instagram, um, which is, again, sorry, just a little print. It's a great platform for you to do whatever you post there, and at least it's for something instead of like being a drawer. But eventually I get that drawing and say, oh, that makes sense with that pitch, and I just throw in there, and all of a sudden you have a original art into a pitch that they were not expecting. So I think that kind of aggressiveness with stuff that you do that you like doing, it really sort of like translates well to the clients. But sometimes it doesn't work at all as well, which is a lot of the times. Yeah.
It's almost like, yeah, your the aggressiveness is coming from your passion for the project, right? Like your understanding of it from top to bottom, and just
Yeah,
showing that, there's almost a trust that builds, because it's like, wow, this person knows it from inside and out, and can take it in any direction. Um,
absolutely. And it
and
also
convey that.
feels like it's a lot, it's not necessarily, there's obviously a big part of like learning what the client wants to say and what they want to do. But a lot of the times that when they come to you is because they want something the way you kind of do it already. So it's a lot more translating what you do and how you do, rather than what they, you know what I mean? Or rather than trying to translate what they want to sell, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
which is I think yeah, it's better. It's much better this way. And then like eventually sit down with the creative director of the advertising agency, and then we talk about the brief, and then how we're gonna tackle this. But yeah,
It's almost like, yeah, they're almost pitching you, like, your style, your world will fit into us, and this is how, and then you just kind of, it's almost like more of a true collaboration in that way, rather than trying to convince them that your idea is the one that they need to do.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And that's absolutely exactly what the kind of like drives me. That's what kind of like moved me away from my studio into what I do for the past 10 years almost. Like yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we got a few more minutes. I got a couple of real knocker questions here. There's a real topical one. So topical that it comes from anonymous. Um, what are your thoughts on AI for 2D animation? So
Oh,
have you entered your brain into that world yet? The one that's happening very fast.
this is the question that has to be asked, like that everyone is talking about this.
Yeah.
Um I'm not really afraid of AI. I'm not afraid of AI at all. Like I think AI, uh, I don't know. I went to, I've been reading. I've experimented with new things. I went to a couple of design conferences as well about that. And then like everyone's talking about AI. I feel like honestly, I feel like if your work is not sort of like there was a famous David Carson's amazing designer. He was just saying like, yeah, you should have like if your work is a creative work, if you're not just pushing paper or something, you don't have to worry. Just worry about being creative, not worry about what the machine can actually do. And then like in my perspective, Pauline, I think when I suppose like when the camera was developed, you have those amazing painter like the scholars, you have all those amazing painters sitting in courts and very wealthy people, so they'll just paint their portraits, like realistic portraits, beautiful portraits. And then those were very few painters. Like there were some really creative and talented people, but some people would get job. They would just be there and they'd be painting every day. And all of a sudden, there's a camera and there's all this kind of like innovations and stuff. And now everyone can take pictures of them. And everyone said, "Oh, those painters are like this is it. Like there's no their art is gone." And then you have Cezanne, Van Gogh, Monet, Manet, all of those guys. They're just painting as fast as they could. They just like that's what the human kind of like expression is. So I think we and then we have eventually and then Picasso comes in. So if it wasn't maybe for that kind of like innovation for us trying to sort of like show what's really human, we wouldn't have those painters. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's exciting. So let's and this one, especially because the person who asked this asked about 2D animation. And then the reason I love 2D animation and I absolutely adore 2D animation is because it's the error. Like when you draw frame by frame and you move along, the eyes just pop sometimes. You see some of those crazy anime and stuff where they break all the rules as well. Like they have like crazy camera movements in 2 or 3 frames, which everyone told us not to do so. And then all of a sudden, if you go frame by frame, all of a sudden, the eyes pop and the pupil doesn't quite work. This is wrong. Like design wise is wrong, but that's what makes it like human. And that's why everyone likes it. If you have like something, especially into the animation, like what we constantly talk about when we have in a project is that this looks too computer generated. Like sometimes you rig a character on After Effects with like those Duix and those tools, and then because you want to make them move in an easier way, but like you're trying to mask as much as we can not to look computer generated. And that's what the AI is doing. That's what the AI eventually is going to do. They're not going to necessarily produce our errors. They're going to try to make it look really nice. So I don't know. I'm not really too worried about it. Maybe use as a reference tool would be nice. But even so, like I still prefer using Pinterest to put my mood boards together,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Because that's when you're gonna stumble on someone's Pinterest page that, oh, that's a happy accident, right? I couldn't agree more. I'm not afraid of AI in any effect. It's going to be, yeah, it's just going to almost force us to bring ideas to the forefront, right? Bring our imperfections. It's going to be the truth and the vulnerability. The humanity is just going to elevate itself, and that's what you see. Yeah, like you said, this great example used of those painters that, you know, they were responding, and they used speed, and they used color, and they used anxiety, and they used frustration, and they used their experience of life, and they created masterpieces, right? And they weren't necessarily seen as masterpieces at the time, but
Mhm.
um they if we look back on it and be like, that's they're still alive, like there's life in that. And I don't I'm pretty sure, at least in our lifetime, AI is not going to be able to be sentient enough to have broken up with somebody or to feel, they ate a really bad taco today and they still have to work, right? Like those experiences of life are what animation brings to the forefront in such an amazing way. And it combines all those art forms, especially 2D animation, as you say.
Yeah, because you have like the AI and the algorithm, and then you keep looking at the same things over and over again. And then I think the problem is that we only been able to just keep looking at it. We just don't get out of that comfort zone. Just keep looking at the same thing over and over again. And my brother and I were big fans of Oasis, and then he just sent me a song that the AI did of one of the Oasis songs, and it does sounds just like Oasis. But my point is like, if it wasn't for Oasis, AI wouldn't be able to create that. Because all it's just
Exactly.
like, there was someone creating that to start with. So my fear with those algorithms that if you like, vanilla or if you like chocolate ice cream, that's all you look at, and then like you never come across a vanilla ice cream. So I think that's the pessimist side of the things for me.
Mhm.
But I'm optimistic. Yeah, use as a tool, maybe use as a reference tool, I don't think it's going to take
Absolutely.
our
And
jobs.
the argument about someone mentioned it in the comments, which is a valid one, which is about regulation. I mean, the regulation is going to come because someone at some point is going to want to make money off AI, which means someone's going to own it. Someone's going to be regulated by that. So if you're a real estate agent or you're an owner of an AI company, you got regulations. It's just how we
Yes.
work. So the art will always rise to the top, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, 100%.
Well, we've taken up a good amount of your time, Pedro. This has just been awesome. I honestly I couldn't believe it's been over almost an hour so far. So we time has flown, but I could talk to you for a couple hours. Let's wrap up with maybe coming full circle here, which is we're so honored that you came to Vancouver Film School. I've been with the school now for 10 years, and have just seen some amazing students come through and gone on to do amazing things, just as like you have. Maybe just tell us if you could go back to that first day of school in VFS. Was it, is there something you would tell yourself? Is there something that you've learned in these last 10 years that you would just sit, 10-year younger Pedro down and be like, hey, man, this is what you need to know?
Um, wow. I think when I was about to start, I remember talking with my dad again, and then like I'm about to board the flight, and it's like, and obviously it is an investment, and you're going there and you're spending your money, your family money, and you're trying to making something, make a career out of this and stuff. And I remember being scared of that responsibility. I think for me it was like, and I talked to my dad, and then he was like, and then I didn't quite know whether I wanted to. I remember like going there, I didn't know if I wanted to be modeling characters. I've always loved it, and concept stuff as well. Or am I good enough? Or am I going to be an animator? And all of a sudden, I got the opportunity to to be an animator there, and then like if I was doing that, I was just put all my heart and put my time, and that's what I did when I got there. I fell in love, and then like nowadays I don't do that much again like 3D character animation anymore. But I fell in love with the process and fell in love with just just go for it. I feel like this is the thing that kind of like really kept me going as well, because the doubts we always have, like am I, and especially if you keep like comparing yourself to other people.
Mhm.
And I remember, yeah, just talking to my dad, it's like, just do it, go and do it, because you're going into the industry, see what happens. And I was so grateful that I did. And then sort of like stop comparing yourself to other people. Maybe compare yourself to who you were yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're in the same spot, yeah, maybe you have to be hard on yourself. But if you're better than you were yesterday, that's already like a win-win, I think. And you just keep going. And yeah, and honestly, I think it's just gonna get better if you just keep doing that. I think.
Just keep walking
Um,
through those doors. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I love
yeah,
it. Compare yourself to yesterday. That's such a great barometer, right? Like that's the only person you're in competition with. Absolutely. You're
mm,
the only person that's going to hold you back. You're the only person that can lift you up. So, um, totally awesome. Well, thanks so much, Pedro. This has been super inspiring. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thanks for staying up late, Pedro. Really appreciate it. You can follow Pedro as Sugar Blood on
Mm.
social media across all the panels, and check out all his work online. Yeah, all the best of luck to Pedro. Thanks so much for doing this. We're so proud of your success, but more proud of your artistry and your pursuit of all the things that you need and want. And we wish you all the best in that pursuit moving forward.
Thanks, Colin. Very kind words, and thank you so much. Again, like I'm honored to be here. It's really nice talking to you. And thanks for everyone's message. It's so nice. No, yeah, I feel like this is amazing. It's coming full circle, talking to VFS again. Brilliant, brilliant. Anytime you guys want, I'll be happy to stay up late to talk about more about
Awesome.
everything more and more. Yeah.
Maybe we'll try and catch you at lunchtime next time. Um, Awesome. Well, again, thanks everyone for their questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all. There was a lot, but we'd be here all night. And yeah, so keep creating, keep being curious, and keep checking out the work that Pedro's doing. And hopefully a little bit of that Pedro magic has fallen through Zoom onto your drawing table or your computer as well. So thanks everyone who joined us. Thank you, Elena, for helping set this up. And again, thank you, Pedro. All the best to you. Bless you. Be safe and be kind to everybody. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.
Thank you, Lena. If anyone wants to hit me up on Instagram and ask me any questions, I'll be there. All
There it
right.
is. The invite's been open, but first he's got to go to bed. So we'll talk. All right, everyone. Good night, good morning, and good luck. Bye now.
Sounds good.